I had the coolest job that any electrical engineer could ever have on the ground crew for Solar Impulse 2, the first solar-powered airplane to fly around the world only using the power of the sun. IEEE USA has given me a competitive edge because of their support system. It is so much easier doing something and being out of your comfort zone when you have someone there saying, "You got this." IEEE USA is more than just a network. It's a family.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thanks for tuning in to today's IEEE USA Livestream webinar, Ultimate Upgrade Essentials, Self-Assessment. I'm your host, Jonathan Joe. This is the second webinar in our Ultimate Upgrade Essentials series. For information on our previous one, as well as upcoming ones in the series, you can check them out through the link we provided on the screen below, as well as in the comments section. IEEE USA's goal is to create programming that is valuable, relevant, and of interest to you. As such, we will be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event and would love your feedback. We value your opinions and would appreciate it if you could take a few minutes and share your thoughts. Joining us today are Drs. Terrence Yeo and Tyson Tam. Dr. Yeo is a scientist at FTS International, which has been named one of the top workplaces for the last 6 years by the Washington Post. In his career, Dr. Yeo has held a variety of roles in systems engineering, R&D portfolio management, program management, and corporate strategy. He is a project management professional and a senior IEEE member. Dr. Tam leads the non-flight software and specialist projects team for Raytheon's EISOC, which stands for Engineering, Implementation, Science, Operations, and Communication, contract at NASA's Jet Propulsion Laboratory. Dr. Tam was previously employed at the Aerospace Corporation, where he was the Associate Systems Director of the Space-Based Infrared Systems Program. He worked directly with the U.S. Space Force leadership and prime contractor senior management to successfully manage the production and launch of the GEO-5 satellite on May of 2021. Without further ado, I'll now pass it off to our presenters. Welcome, Terrence and Tyson. Glad you could both join us today.
Thanks, Jonathan.
Thank you, Jonathan. We are super excited to be able to talk to you today about the concept of self-assessment. In many parts of our career, especially in the IEEE, we are very much focused on the technical, to be able to do technical work very, very well. However, there's always a humanity portion to our jobs. It actually takes up, I would say, 90% of our focus and time. But a lot of times we don't actually look into that or assess it. And in order to understand human interactions, one of the first things we need to know is ourselves. And that's why I'm a really, really strong proponent of self-assessment. It started way back when I was picked for a leadership course that gave us an opportunity to look at a 360 of ourselves. And 360s tend to be fairly extensive. There's a lot of people involved. They do a lot of reviews about yourself and your performance. And I got to thinking, wow, this is taking a lot of time. I wish I had done this much, much earlier in my career. So I thought about ways of democratizing that, making a really small, compact portion that allows you to do that self-assessment on a regular basis and opens up possibilities for you to grow before you get to that point in which you're assessed by a leadership committee or what have you. And in that case, a lot of those things may be fixed, or there's a lot of work that needs to go into fixing that as you're in that part of the career. So we're really looking to talk about that. And as engineers, look at our personality, look at our way of doing things as that, something that can be engineered, something that can be changed, something that's malleable. And so I have with me a former colleague as well as a friend, Tyson Tam, who's also passionate about self-assessment and the power that it has upon our career development and relationship together. Tyson, can you share a little bit about your thoughts about this subject?
Yeah, thanks, Terrence. And thanks for having me part of this talk. I'm really looking forward to the discussion we're going to have today. So yeah, self-assessment, I think, is something that is valuable throughout your career and as you decide to make changes in your career. Because when you understand where your strengths are, your weaknesses, you can look at those as opportunities to improve yourself or just recognize what you can do to accentuate some of those strengths and then work on some of those weaknesses. I myself in my career have gone from being a subject matter expert in lithium-ion batteries and gradually moved towards management. And as I moved into management, that was an area that I found that I really liked. I liked working with people, looking at how I could improve their careers, remove their roadblocks when they're doing their tasks so they can focus on getting the job done. So as I've moved further in my career, I realized that's an area that I would like to focus on, and how can I utilize my strengths to allow those kind of career paths for people.
That's really awesome, Tyson. And just a thank you ahead of time. Tyson has graciously offered to work online at this point in time, a 360 in real time. And so we have some of that to show you, and it's going to be really, really great. If you notice some of the pictures that are behind us in terms of these animals, I want to share that personality is a very unique thing. It is an adaptation for all of us. And it's an adaptation that allows us to be most successful in our lives. The relationships you have are based off of those personalities. The question I have is that this is also for people who are feeling beached, somewhat out of your element, just like the sea lion is resting on the shore. They're a mammal. Their past may have been on land. However, they're not in their element. And when you're in your element like this, you can see that true element. They're able to fly through water and be able to be excited. I had the opportunity to see them face to face within a couple inches, and you could see how excited they were in this particular environment. So truly, we're looking to grow that and develop that in you right now. So stay tuned, keep tuned in as we go through this process, because we're going to be going through a process that you can do yourself right here, right now. So in that, we're also looking to develop your value proposition. This is a blue-footed booby. It's one of the rarest animals on the planet. It's only found in a particular part of Ecuador, and it has blue feet. It's something that people around the world travel to this one spot to be able to see this animal. It's an extremely amazing place and event. And place, but it's really because of that individual bird that hallmarks that. You are that bird. You have that uniqueness built into you. And as we go through this process, we're looking to reveal that blue feet, something that's unique that others will come to value and to go to great lengths to provide an opportunity to meet. And those are the things that we're looking for in this process as opportunities to really reveal that part. So let's get to it. Let's get to this place. And as I was thinking through this 360 way back when, a few years ago, I started thinking about what sort of things that are useful in business can be applied directly to your personality. And I developed this concept called compact mentoring. This is all based off and shared in a book that's going to be published by the IEEE, called IEEE Ultimate Upgrade Essentials Self-Assessment. And so the links that I'm providing both here and also after the meeting will give you an opportunity to follow me on LinkedIn and to be able to get that once it's submitted. It's free for all IEEE members. But applying what SWOT analysis, so what's SWOT? SWOT stands for strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats. That's typically applied to a business or to an entity, but businesses are actually legal entities in and of themselves. So we are actually applying that to ourselves. And a SWOT analysis is where you go through and you ask your peers. So you have one person that you ask that knows you well in your personal life, and another peer that's in your career or in a third place, something that's slightly different area. And then the third person is actually yourself. And you ask yourself, okay, what are my strengths? What are my weaknesses? What are my opportunities? And what are my threats? And then you go ahead and ask that of your friend, and also ask that of your coworker. And through that, it actually opens up a few things, because most of the people don't go up to somebody one day and say, hey, I'm asking about what my weaknesses are. Can you tell me? But that opens up an opportunity to gain insight into not only what your strengths, weakness, opportunities, and threats are, but also what your perceptions are of your strengths and what others perceive. It could be that what you perceive as a weakness is actually perceived as a strength by others. And so understanding that is a crucial portion of that. Now, Tyson, you've been able to go through this. We worked this actually this week alone. It doesn't take very much time. What are your thoughts? How was your experience doing this SWOT analysis?
I think it was really interesting for me because some of the things that were brought up, I think I kind of knew, but to see it written out very clearly and specifically with some examples really helped me understand that, yeah, that really is a strength that I should try and amplify more. And in terms of weaknesses, I always had some kind of a question as like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this, or like, am I kind of afraid? But then having it seen spelled out from other people, seeing it on myself, just makes it more clear that, hey, this is an area I can work on. And then one part that was pretty interesting to me was opportunities. I've always kind of had discussions, and as I mentioned before, like I like management, but one thing I didn't realize and I probably should try and take advantage more is that at your job there are opportunities to do to try and improve like management skills, negotiation skills. There are career development resources that, sometimes you're just too focused on your job, that there are resources that your company may provide and you should take advantage of those. And that was something that kind of stuck out for me too. Is like there's opportunities I should try and take.
Absolutely, absolutely. And it's a very simple process, right? You're just asking, what are my strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats? Don't write a long, long paragraph. Just
Yeah.
write and list a couple sentences. So
I
let's
think
delve into your particular SWOT analysis. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think the whole process only took like maybe 10, 15 minutes for myself, and then for the other people too. I didn't want them to dwell and write like an essay, right? But rather what immediately comes to your mind as a strength for me or as a weakness. So yeah, this
Exactly.
was really good to do.
Okay, so let's go through this. So one of your main strengths is that you maintain calm during conflict or stressful events. You're also adaptable to new ideas, but you're also very conscientious of your coworkers and team, and somebody who tries to lead by example. I saw that time and time again in terms of the other parts of this questionnaire. As you sort it together, you start to say, oh, these are, three of these people said that. Myself and my two peers said those things. And then there are others that only one or two said that. Oh, that's interesting. So what did you bring out just by looking at your strengths, weakness, and opportunities and threats?
So definitely the strength, I did agree with the trying to maintain calm. I think that's something that I think it was first kind of brought up to me maybe in my job before I joined aerospace, where we were working at a startup. So lots of activity, issues that we had to overcome. And I was given an opportunity to lead a team for that. And we had to overcome a lot of different kinds of issues for delivering a new product. And I think everybody kind of recognized my calm demeanor throughout that, not getting too emotional or too excited about something when it goes wrong. I think that was very helpful for the team. So that part I did see. Some of the weaknesses, in my own personal life, I know that I need to work more on setting those boundaries between the work-life balance. And I think I really wasn't doing that. And I think it carried over from early on in my career where I was really focused on work. And at that point, I'm single, I don't have a family. So I could work 60 hours a week and not have to worry about coming home, somebody's waiting there, or like my kids want to do something. And it's been a gradual transition as I've started a family to understand that, hey, I need to set aside some time, make the boundaries clear. And if I set those boundaries, be consistent with it. Because if I tell somebody, hey, I'm on vacation, I won't be reachable, but then I'm answering emails while I'm on vacation, well, then I've just made that boundary unclear. And they're like, well, he's actually responding, so let me continue to message him, right? And I've tried to get better at that. And I think that's part of why I've tried to shift my career more towards management, working with people rather than being that technical SME who's always on call, ready to solve the problem. I think that was echoed between my wife and myself. I think so we've continued to have discussions about that. And opportunities, as I mentioned earlier, seeing that there are opportunities at your company that you can take advantage of. I've seen some people. I've had friends who've started companies where they do some like career development, but then that's like an extra cost. Well, maybe I should look at my own company and see what resources are available there. And so that's definitely an area that I'm going to try and take advantage of, especially as I move further in my career towards working with people and managing people. And then threats, this is something that it's always kind of been aware of in the back of my mind as I get older. Am I falling behind in technology? I kind of think about that in terms of like my parents using their iPhone or iPad and always giving me a call. Hey, how do I do this? I need to attach something to this email, right? But that could be applied to work too. There could be other technologies coming up. Yeah, I was a SME for lithium ion, but there are other energy storage technologies coming up. If I want to continue being an expert in that area, I still need to read about the research that's going on, some publications that are out there, newer technologies that are coming up. And that also applies to the areas that I manage of software development, software engineering. So I think, doing this, even though it didn't take a lot of time, it was really valuable to kind of call out all those points that some of them are already in the back of your mind, but then to see it written out is really helpful.
Absolutely. And to have your peers notice that as well is that confirmation. And, if you never asked, they wouldn't have ever shared. I think all of us are wanting to see others thrive. There's really no ill will. That's the unique part about humanity. We're looking to serve others. It's our economy is that way, right? We're not here to just sustain ourselves. We do so by specializing our career to serve others and their interests. So here's a little shout out to the rest of the audience who's watching. Please type in your questions. We're actually going to have a question and answer period in the very middle and at the very end. So please feel free to type it in. Jonathan will curate them and put a select few of them in the chat section down there. And so, yes, this is really, really great to hear that the SWOT analysis was helpful. But we're also hearing some themes, right? You're already feeling and seeing your prior experience of how you acted and seeing that continued. I know as when I had my first child, the first thing I had was blinders on my eyes. I don't quite remember the first year with my first child because you're still thinking, I'm going to be successful by doing things in this specific way. And then you realize the world has changed around you, the environment has changed, but you haven't flexed with that. And then as time goes by, you start to flex and change. That has some stress, some duress, but that allows you to then grow into each of these periods. And so having the SWOT analysis from time to time, I actually recommend it about once a year, is a good time for you to get a vector check. Are we going in the right way? Where have I gone in the past? And that's really great. As you start taking more and more of these SWOTs, you can actually look at them from the past and start to see, oh, these trends have changed, but these others have stayed the same. And they're one of my weaknesses. How can I better improve that? So not only do you have a singular snapshot, but the temporal aspect really helps in the future and in how you can plot your future.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, Terrence, because then you can also kind of take that temporal part of your SWOT analysis and also maybe even map it to where you were in your career, right? You were at certain jobs and, hey, I took a position that was maybe more stressful, but I was able to build up this new strength because of that, right?
Exactly.
And in my own career, I think that's something that has happened because I worked out on the West Coast at the start of my career. And then about 10 years later, I moved to the East Coast. And very different personalities. They weren't, I wouldn't say mean or aggressive, but just more direct, right? But it was a different kind of personality that I had to work with. And I wasn't really used to that. A little bit stressful, but it allowed me to kind of change my thinking a little bit. Like, how do I talk to these people and have them understand me, but then also not take everything so personally when discussing things with them.
Exactly. And it's also crucial to do that early in your career, particularly because the risk level is low, but the reward level is high. So being able to do that early and finding all of those weaknesses and also all the strengths and improving upon them is much better than waiting to the end of your career or at the peak of your career and then making a crucial mistake that causes everything to fall apart. Those are the ones that are hard to recover. Those are epic fails, right? But small failures at the very beginning of your career are actually very good and important for the improvement and for your overall strength, right? You're getting all of these kind of bruises, arrows on your back. that make you stronger
Mhm.
and stronger and stronger. So let's move on. Let's move on to seeing, okay, you've got a certain way of doing things. You see your strengths, weakness, and opportunities. Those are more of the kind of the symptomatic portions of your experience. It really comes down to personality, how you as an individual work through that. And I have a certain philosophy on this. There's a lot of different indicators out there, personality types. I think the big five is focused on by professionals because it is very accurate and has a lot more ability to characterize a person. I like the Myers-Briggs type indicator, not so much for its accuracy, but more for its ability to map. Because I believe, and I think that's, I've heard that in some other leadership circles, that your personality is actually just your preference for interacting with the world and also interacting with yourself. It's something that maybe partly is you're born with, and also based off your experiences, you've been successful in one way or the other in that personality. And so those personality aspects, whether you're an introvert or an extrovert, whether you are have a deep inner world as an intuitive versus a sensing where you access information from outside the outside world in, whether you're a person that is moved and also feels the environment, the emotions, versus a thinker that looks at the logic and pure logic, or whether you have a strong sense of structure within the world, or that would be judging versus perceiving, which is where you let the structure occur and then move into that. Those aspects are really aspects that have made you successful thus far, but may not be giving you the success in the future. So it may be a strength now that could turn into a weakness. And so as we look into the Myers-Briggs, what I like to see it's like, and we just talked about this earlier, Tyson, that it's like a map of the greater Los Angeles area. A lot of, it's important to know where you are, but also where you may get to go or where others have been in order to be able to interact and to be able to succeed and thrive together as a society. So we have your MBTI analysis. You went through that. You know, this took only, how long did it take?
Maybe like 10 minutes.
10 minutes,
it didn't take
right?
very long, yeah.
And there are numerous websites out there. Really, you just have to look up MBTI test, and out comes the first one, which is super straightforward. Introverted, sensing, feeling, judging. So what we're doing now is not only just saying, okay, this is how I interact with the world, and you can read all the descriptions, but then what we do, the key thing is you take the SWOT analysis, the snapshot, the symptoms of how you interact in the world, and then we place that into various categories in your personality. So a lot of the words, actually all of them, have been taken from the first section that we had talked about, and we're now inputting that into your personality. So the introverted portion of you is what allows you to maintain calm during conflict and stressful events. So when stressful events come in, and I'm the same way, I go internal, right? And by doing so, outside, it looks like I'm very calm and there's kind of a wall of peace, even though inside, it's all inside running around in my head, right? And as a sensor, you're adaptable to new ideas because you're feeding it from the outside. You're not creating a specific thing. And that's different for me. I'm intuitive, so I have a very specific way of how the world works. So new ideas are actually very difficult for me to accept. I like to create the new ideas, but I don't like to accept new ideas. And in that, you're seeing also, because you're sensing this from the environment, you're able to set those clear boundaries in your work-life balance, leading to overwork and stress. So as we put these together, and we had a little talk about this beforehand, what are your thoughts, Tyson, about this process?
I think it's really interesting to take that SWOT and combine it with the MBTI, because it gives you a sense of, you know, some of the whys of maybe why I act a certain way, or like you said, perceive things in a certain way through a kind of lens. And I think as we'll go into this more, it's like, if I am introverted and I then kind of shrink back and appear calm, am I becoming more effective in a situation that shouldn't call for that? Maybe not. So, and I think you'll go into more details about that. But to get it mapped here kind of gives me more rationale as to why I may act that way or work in a certain manner with people. And to understand that, it also allows me to see, well, why is that a weakness, and how can I change that? And maybe in the MBTI, if there's another way of approaching things, it gives you another way. Well, maybe you could approach a situation differently. You don't have to be extremely quiet or calm. There's another way to get your point across, right? To negotiate, to debate, and discuss things. And I think one of the points here is in the feelings, right? And I think part of that, maybe it's like a combination of the sensing, is like I could be too concerned with how people perceive. So then I have too much sense of like what they're thinking, but is that really going to be effective for me to get the job done, right? And worry about people, are they too busy, or maybe they don't have enough time to answer me, when actually I should, give them the opportunity. Here, this is a role that you could do, a task that I trust you to do. I believe you have the time, the resources, the skills. I delegate to them, and thereby kind of opening up my own work-life balance better.
Exactly. Thanks, Tyson, for that insight. It is actually super quick, right? It only took you 10, 15 minutes to answer basically 25 questions that help map all of the experiences you have on the SWOT into your personality. And I give the example or the analogy that, let's say you've gotten a high performance vehicle, right? And each car, each sports car has a very different thing. Let's say you have a Supra, Toyota Supra. It's a very nimble, small car. It goes, it can turn really, really well. So it can be a canyon carver. But on the straightaways, right, a Mustang, a V8 Mustang with a lot of acceleration will give you that power, right? That's the SWOT portion. But then mapping that, you're really saying, oh, it's the big engine that gives me that power to go straight. But it's also that big engine that keeps me from being nimble to turn left and right. And so those are the sort of things that we're getting. We're getting down to the components of the vehicle of your life. And as engineers, now we can think about things like, what if I upgrade, right? So in the case of judging, right, you've now become aware of opportunities to improve your technical and management skills, conflict resolution through taking classes. Now you can say, well, I'm going to upgrade that portion of my judging so that I can go take those classes, that I can then be aware in those moments, in terms of being conscientious, and because I have a very strong worldview of what things should be, right, and be focused about that. So you can up the game on that, upgrade those components. The other thing you can also do is downgrade certain things. So you mentioned that a little bit in terms of your feelings, right? In terms of not being too concerned about how others perceive yourself, or difficulty saying no. You can dial that feeling down a little, right, in order to improve your performance in these specific areas. It'd be the equivalent of taking the Mustang and trying to make it into a canyon carver, right? We know it's a heavy vehicle. You can try to lighten it up by removing some components. That would be kind of downgrading it. So maybe putting in actually a 4-cylinder turbo engine, which is actually what my car is, right? It's actually, the chassis is the same Mustang, but I've downgraded the engine, so to speak, and that gives me some of that maneuverability. So that's your downgrading of your feelings. But an upgrade is where you, let's say, want to put a strut bar in the very front to stiffen up the suspension so we can then handle those curves much better, right? So there's an upgrade and also a downgrade that allows you to improve your performance.
That's right.
Yeah, so that's where we can start to think about our personality as a component engine that then you can work with. So at this point, I know we've gone through a lot of things. I want to throw out a little bit of insight, is that now that you understand yourself and how you interact with the world, the key now is that you can then start to understand others, right? Because it only took you 20 minutes or so to fill these things out, you can effectively ask those questions of your peers without actually asking them those questions. You can actually put your mind, put yourself into their shoes and take the test based off of how they've reacted to you in the past, right? And so you're able to then actually create a map of your coworkers, your peers, and understand how they think. And I think that's been very useful in my relationships, both personal as well as professional, where I start mapping people in that way. So then I can see the points in which are both beneficial and also detrimental to relationships. I have one friend that we worked on the AI X Prize together, and we've always had good chemistry, but I never figured it out until one day I asked him, "What's your MBTI?" I started working it out myself, and I said, "This is why we interact so well." He's a complete P. So he has the world is his oyster. Every idea that comes into his head, he then jumps off of and grows into new ideas. And he would just spout that. And I would grab those ideas and go, oh, wait, okay, how do we make this in reality? Step by step, boom, boom, boom. That's the judging portion of my personality. And so our personalities help complement us to be able to create. We ended up having 5 patents, AI patents based off of it, and be able to get some really interesting insight in a very crucial time of AI technology, just when GPT-2 hadn't ever come out yet. It wasn't actually published, but we already knew that this sort of searching of new ideas and being able to dream a new AI, have an AI dream new ideas was very crucial in the progression of the technology. So Tyson, do you have any insight or thoughts about interactions and how understanding yourself and others helps?
Yeah, so an example that I have is actually, and it still happens today, is sometimes when I'm trying to craft an email, right, and I'm trying to ask somebody to do something, I find myself at times just when I first start to type, it's a very passive email. It's like, if you have the time, can you take care of this? When, and I read it and I'm like, wait, why does it sound so passive? Do I need to sound that passive? If it's a part of their job and something that I feel they could do, I should be more assertive about it. So I go back and then craft it again and say, please complete this and take care of it. And I will sometimes give a deadline, right? Because I think that allows them to understand, okay, yeah, Tyson needs this by this time. And he's being very direct about not being kind of meek about it, but just like, here, I need to get this. I need you to get this done, right? And that's something that I've tried to continually work on. And that's part of being too concerned with how others feel. And doing the SWOT, it kind of makes more sense as to why was I doing that. But as I progress more and move into higher levels of management, I realize you have to set those expectations with people and make it clear when you need something completed or done. And if they're not able to do it, then have that discussion and understand, well, okay, I can't get this done because you already asked me to do this other thing, right? Maybe I don't realize that, but allowing that open communication then would allow me to be direct and not have them feel like, well, why is he suddenly so harsh on me, right? So kind of also being consistent in the way I communicate with people.
No, I think that's really crucial insight, is that you also, you're aware of yourself and you're aware of how you are perceived by others and how you interact. That's a strength, of course, that's part of your MBTI in terms of your feeling portion and the sensing portion working together. So those are crucial things. I can hear that, I can see that as part of your personality. There's also another step, right? So we're talking about that next step of understanding the other's MBTI. Now you can actually craft that email more nuanced, not just to your own proclivities, but the others. There may be a person in which all you have to do is send them a text saying, hey, I need this. And they'll get it to you within 10 minutes.
That's right.
Whereas others would not. So there's no need to go to that length. And you'd know them enough that if you went to that length, they'll feel under pressure and they would actually go slower, right? So there's a lot of nuances in that as you understand not only yourself, which is you win 50% of the battle, Sun Tzu says that.
That's right.
If you understand the other as well, then you have 100% understanding and you'll be able to thrive in many different areas and regimes. So just want to give you those thoughts and ideas to the audience that your personality is not fixed, but it's actually malleable, and understanding that allows you to either strengthen your strengths or tone down your weaknesses based off of your personality, not based off of the outcomes or the symptoms, right? Instead of trying harder, now you know, oh, my feelings need to be reduced and my judging needs to be increased in terms of the MBTI, not the actual feelings of judging. But by doing that, now you can actually work on something that is an actual knob in your personality. So let's take a Q&A break. Jonathan's been collecting some of the questions out there. I'm sure there's a fair amount of questions. So let's take a break and work on this particular portion of the presentation.
Sure. So, folks, again, if you have any questions, please post them in the comments / live chat section, so that we can share them and then address them with Terrence and Tyson. So far we only have one question from our audience. One of our the question is a situational one, and let me just switch my camera view here so that Tyson is on screen. Sorry.
Oh, yeah.
What suggestions do you have for engineers who try to retire but decided was too early and have a 4-year or multi-year gap since last employment? I understand with people are pretty apprehensive about having, and I'm sure employers are too, about having gaps in their resume in
Mhm.
potential
Mhm.
employees' resumes. Uh, and any tips?
So that's an interesting question. I'll have to think about it a little more, but I have a few thoughts about retirement itself. So retirement is one of those interesting things where you do have a specific idea of what it's like, right? And it's also based on what you're doing at present. And you say, well, I don't want to do this for the rest of my life. I've got a long road ahead where I want to be able to do what I want to do. Here's kind of my checklist. And I think you retire, you have the party, you go off and you start working that checklist. And then after a certain period, you go, okay, I'm done. Now what do I do? And I think that's something very unique about the human experience, is that we're built to work, we're built to serve. And when we wrap a lot of our life and our personal worth in that, there's an important part of that, but it's also important to be aware of that so that you can then mitigate those concerns. And I fully understand, especially in this part of the economy and the economic cycle, there may be some concerns about finances and other things. So what I would say is that based off of what we've talked about so far, to do a SWOT analysis of where you are at right now. So you've had 4 years or so of retirement. You've been able to do things that you've not been able to do if you were working. So we know that. How can we then take that next step? Well, really, you should look at your peers and maybe talk to your former colleagues and share with them not only where you are at and where you want to go, but also ask them for feedback. And I think you'll get a lot of interesting thoughts and ideas, because it's always situational, right? I can't share with you a specific, oh, go to this particular website, post this, and you're going to get a job. It's really, you need to look at how others know you and draw upon that in order to delta off and have a successful outcome. So my first suggestion would be go through that MBTI, go through that SWOT analysis, and start looking at the opportunities and threats of that retirement gap. And really look at that gap as an opportunity. What did you do outside of your day-to-day job? And are those actually things you can put on your resume? Because the people say, okay, taking a vacation is an opportunity to relax, but taking a vacation is also an opportunity to see something you've never seen before and to gain ideas and concepts that then you can put back into your daily work, right? So in some ways, you've taken a 4-year-long vacation, and now you can take all that experience, all those new things, and put it back into your new position and new direction. Tyson, do you have any thoughts for this engineer?
Yeah, I think, having that 4-year break, especially after retirement, I don't think it is detrimental, because people understand, when you, at that time, when you came to the end of your career, you wanted to retire. But I think what Terrence brought up, doing that SWOT will really be helpful, because it will give you an idea of what kind of work you want to go back into. And then looking at the SWOT, what areas do you need to work on and improve? Or what things did you already do that you can show as a strength that you would carry over into another position that you would take? One of the things that I've seen in my career is, hiring people, is that some people, when they come out of retirement, they may not have the same exact technical skill as when they left, but what they do bring to the table is a lot of that mentoring and that experience of solving problems that have come up in the past, or knowing how to go through a path of solving that problem. The different steps that you would take, the questions you would ask, I think those are some of the things that, regardless of how the technology changes, is something that's still valuable, a problem-solving skill. So I think those are areas that you could try and highlight when you're looking for a new position. And if it's something that's going to be very technical, then, maybe highlight you're still keeping up by reading some of the publications, participating in webinars, virtual conferences. These days, it's a lot easier to try and do that. And I think I would not see it as a negative, but as an area of, yeah, I respect this person because they wanted to take time off. They were retiring. I think nobody would argue that that's a bad thing to do. And now you bring a set of experiences, knowledge to the table that other people would not have.
Absolutely, Tyson. And I think I just wanted to share that this also applies, what you shared, Tyson, applies to those who've gone out of the workforce for whatever reason, whether they're taking
That's right.
extended paternity leave, maternity leave, whether they had to take care of a loved one. Those things are accepted. I mean, this is the unique part about a society, is we understand those life change events and are very much open to bring it back. I know our former company, Aerospace, has posted, they have a special program for folks who have left the industry for a period of time and are willing to come back. They have special programs on that. So there are many companies who value the experience that you have. It's just a matter of finding that, and it comes through both networks and also understanding yourself through SWOT analysis. Jonathan, you were going to say something?
Oh no, I was just going to echo both of your statements. Tyson's, I really liked how your point about how 4 years or that gap isn't necessarily detrimental. I think career-wise, it definitely isn't detrimental, but 4 years definitely is it's a substantial amount of time, and there's no way one person would have stayed the same during those 4 years. So especially being able to assess yourself afterwards is a really key factor in being able to find new opportunities afterwards. Terrence, really like that point, your point about the whole MBTI, the Myers-Briggs in general. I think we were going over Tyson's just now. The ISFJ, was that yours? Um, I myself, I'm a ISFP, so they're pretty similar, subtle differences, I think. And I think being able to understand yourself and understand what makes you tick definitely helps you be open to the differences and accepting other people's ways of thinking as well. So just really like those points. So thank you to our audience member for that question. And yeah, Terrence and Tyson, I think that's it for
Okay,
questions
great.
so far. So you can move on.
Okay.
So let's move on, and we'll take a small, shorter question and answer period. That's a really great question, and we're rooting for you. So let's move on and talk about deltas. So the interesting part, right, if you're looking at your personality, it's something that you are most comfortable with. But as engineers, we can also work to do changes to that deltas. And I want to stress that it's a lot like going on a map, right? And let's say you've spent most of your time in downtown Los Angeles, but you haven't really experienced Long Beach before. A lot of times we want to be able to go ahead and look at it. Now there are ways of doing it, right? You can go onto Google Maps and do Google Live View and be able to see, okay, here's how I'm going to traffic. Here's how the traffic patterns look. Here's how how things are going. And another thing, to drive there, let's say on the weekend. Let's say you've got a customer meeting on Monday or Tuesday. So on Sunday, you drive that area so you get an understanding and a feel of that area, right? That's something you can do actually with a personality. And I want to, again, stress that personality is not something fixed, that this is who I am, but it's a map of where you're going. And so we're going to talk about changing those personalities, much like changing your clothing. So in this case, I've been wearing a white shirt throughout this period of time. But if I put on a jacket, right, I have a very different feel of the presentation, right? What if I put on a tie? What if that tie is not blue, but it's a bright neon green, right? Those things change the outside interface that you have with others. However, it doesn't change you, right? I'm still me on the inside, and I can always take out or put on different aspects for a short period of time, right? This may be good in the wintertime, but in the summer, this might get a little hot for me, and I'll have to take it off, right? Those are the things that we can think about. So Let's go to a practical application. Tyson, we've talked about the MBTI analysis, and we talked about that feeling portion earlier, where we want to dial that down, right? But instead of dialing that down, the challenge is, can you change your personality, maybe even for a short period of time, from an ISFJ to an ISTJ? So not just dialing down your feelings, because as you dial down your feelings, maybe your weaknesses are diminished, but also the strengths that are associated with that feeling. We didn't have time to put all of this on paper on this presentation, but those strengths also dial down, and they usually dial down 2 to 5x faster than your weaknesses. So what you find is your weaknesses are diminished, but you actually lose some of your strengths in the process. So the challenge is that, can you completely change that out and say, you know what, I know people who are thinking-based, very logic-based. I'm just going to let go of my preference and go with another preference. Change out this tool set and say, I'm going to be a thinker, and I'm going to act like a thinker in this process. So as we role play that, Tyson, how would an ISTJ work in your situation, particularly for these weaknesses?
Yeah, I think you've highlighted here the feelings and being too concerned, right? And I think part of that is, instead of trying to think like, how is that person thinking, or how is that person going to feel if I were to act a certain way, just understand that everybody has a responsibility, and they know what they need to do. I know what I need to do. I need to get my point across and not be too concerned with, is that going to be too negative, or is that going to be too harsh, right? But I think in order to set that up, you have to understand how those individuals act. And I think you kind of brought that up, is that you create that MBTI map of your network. You understand what works for somebody and what doesn't work for somebody, right? So now you can think about, okay, I need to get this task done. And the best way to go about doing that is to send an email, follow up with a text. This person, all you need to do is just send them that email. You don't need to ping them again. They'll get that response. So I think part of being able to flip any of these characteristics is understanding and setting up that foundation up front, so that you're not just doing it out of the blue. And then they're like, what's going on? Why is Tyson like so different now, right? And you gradually build that foundation. And I think part of that is like the work-life balance. How can you set up that boundary? Well, you maybe do it in steps, rather than say all of a sudden, okay, don't send me any emails after 5. I'm not answering anything. But then, like, but he was just doing that last week. Suddenly, why is he doing that, right? So maybe you can gradually set that up so that you are able to make the change, but they're not like, whoa, what's going on? It's like out of the blue, right?
No, exactly. I think that having those points of testing and changing in very neutral situations will be very helpful, because quite honestly, all of us flip our personalities, our MBTIs, at any given time. Usually it's under duress. So one of the examples I'll give is that, let's say you are sitting at customer service at a store, and you're an introverted person. So when somebody comes up to you, you kind of and they're aggressive, they're upset about a particular product, you tend to then kind of go internal, right, and remain that calm during that conflict. But if they keep on ratcheting that up, right, you'll strengthen your strength. That's the typical first response, is that you just become more of who you are, or you're more of who you're comfortable with. But that doesn't help, because they're not listening to you. You're trying to speak in a controlled manner, and they're just getting more and more upset. Eventually, you're going to snap, you're going to change, and then you may actually change into an extrovert and start calling somebody else or standing up to them and shouting back at them, right? So you are going to flip your personality when things don't go the way you want it. You start first initially strengthen that, because you're used to that, and that's what's been successful. But when it becomes not successful, or continues to be unsuccessful, you will actually just throw that away and try something completely different. Now, in times of extreme duress, you actually start flipping multiple numbers of that. So you may go extroverted, and then you may actually go thinking, right? So I don't really care about this person. They're just being a jerk to me. So I'm going to shout in their face, and I'm not going to care of what they think of me, right? You flip two of those ideas in an instant, right? But those are extreme connections, extreme times. And in doing so, you're actually in an area that's actually high volatility, right? It actually matters. So it's good to have that experience of saying, well, let me flip to be a little bit more extroverted in this point in time, so that when those duresses come, you're able to control it without going nuclear on someone.
And I think you bring up a good point about trying to almost practice. I think I was a part of like a career development course, and one of the things that was valuable, although uncomfortable, was to role play a situation where things aren't going right and the person is maybe being aggressive or just acting in a manner that you're typically not used to, right? And how do you control your own emotion so that you are still effective but not completely going out, full rage on them or anything, right? And I think putting yourself in uncomfortable situations through role playing is definitely a way to kind of practice how to be a better negotiator, manager, mentor.
Well, thanks, Tyson. I think those are really cool things. And by doing so, right, by role playing and using the MBTI, you can role play a specific person with actually a specific background. Really, you just type in the other type that you want to turn into, and you can read how they experience the world, how they are able to do that. And you can actually find somebody and test them. What would happen if somebody came up to you and did this? And they'll say, well, I'll just do this. Why? Right? You can actually poll them. And in that, you get to know the other person much better and also understand that that part of your personality can be changed, right? So in that, you can fly high. You can actually do things that you weren't normally able to do by being flexible in these particular portions and push the limits. You understand the limits of where you are, how the other flip side, not just reducing who you are, but flipping to the completely different part of you, a part that you haven't experienced before. Understanding those limits and then pushing it anyway in a very controlled manner in a role play scenario, so that when the time comes under duress, you can then flip from your preferred personality to these others without going overboard and causing issue. One thing I do want to share in that is that there are times in which you totally flip, right? So I've mentioned this before. I'm an INFJ based off of the questionnaire. I can flip into the other portion, which is going from what they call a Yoda state to the Hulk state, right? Where I'm just always angry, as that Mark Ruffalo had said famously during Avengers, where he switched from his one side to the other. How do you engineer a soft landing when you're completely flipped and you're trying to make way, right? And you're under so much duress that you don't know who you are anymore. I think it's very important to look at your landing spot and focus on that. Instead of just being out of control, for me would be the ESTP personality. And I'm not saying ESTPs are bad, it's just I'm not used to being an ESTP. And so it's like you taking yourself and going into a Lamborghini. You don't understand or know its capabilities. You're a little dangerous and reckless in that point, right? So that's all it really is. But a precision driver who's driven a Lamborghini, who then tries to accept that in, let's say, a Mini Cooper, will have very different experiences. They need to have that experience to understand that. But really focus on that landing spot, because we're always caught in the turbulence of the moment. We're always wanting maybe to bail out of the situation. Maybe you have a tough situation at work or in your personal life. It's always good to know where you're going to be landing and then engineer that in a soft way, doing your best not to burn bridges, but also knowing that when you land, you're bringing half the problem with you, and that's yourself. And if you see from place to place that you're having the same issues over and over again, it might be something where you're the one who's actually causing the issue. And it's really something like a SWOT analysis and a peer review would help open those things up so that you can engineer a better outcome in the future. So just consider that in terms of engineering soft landings, that your personality is an important part, but you are bringing half the problem to the situation, and it will go with you wherever you go. Any thoughts, Tyson?
Yeah, actually, I wanted to add to that. In terms of engineering a soft landing, one of the things you can think about is that there are people who have gone through this, right? And they have a lot of experience. And I found in my career, mentors who are more senior have been kind of the most valuable for me in my career, trying to understand and help me think of a path and how to get there. And in tough situations, I go to them and they have really good advice because they've been in similar situations. And so they can help you engineer that soft landing. And I encourage anybody in your career, at any point in your career, to find a mentor, whether it's at your company, outside of work, or even a friend. They don't have to be more senior. They can just be somebody to bounce ideas off of. But having somebody to discuss things with is really valuable, and I found to be extremely valuable in my career and as I continue and move in my own career.
Thanks, Tyson. I think that's really great advice, to have peers and friends that can give you insight. Another thing that in terms of friendships is I encourage everyone to make friends across the aisle, so to speak. I know we've had in this period of our society a period of separation, a divergence of you're on one side or the other, you're a 0 or a 1. I think one thing that's important as we go through this MBTI, as you put yourself in other people's shoes, you're really realizing that the only enemy is really you and your perceptions of others. Because in the grand scheme of things, everyone is a hero in their own story. And there are villains that come into that story, but they're not really the villains because you're actually a villain in somebody else's story. And you know yourself that you're not a villain. So how does that match? It's really the perception of one another and how they come into your life in what stage, right? They could be a coworker, a friend in one stage, but if they came in from a slightly different time period, they could be a competitor. And so your friend could actually be your enemy or your friend, right? So in that case, just think about it as we start to understand other people, getting in other people's shoes through the MBTI, understanding their MBTI, that there's no one good personality and one evil personality. There's actually not one good relational personality between one and the other. It's really a timing period in your perception of your story of your life. And you're the hero in the story, and so therefore you characterize those things. So instead, see them as untapped resources of experience, like Tyson said, where you may never get to fully realize, a complete, for me, an ESTP personality. I just can't handle it. But I know others who are ESTPs, and I can live vicariously through them and understand how they interact with the world, and then take those best parts and tweak it and use it in parts here and there, so that you can go outside your comfort zone and really grow as an individual, and then therefore then understand others and have regard and care for them. So all the tools there that we've been talking about are situational. All of the things that you perceive are situational, and just be aware of that as you delve into this particular aspect. And one last thing I wanted to share before I leave it to Tyson to close is this concept of adapt and thrive. The picture that I have behind me is a marine iguana. There's only one marine iguana in the entire world, and that exists in Ecuador in the Galapagos Islands. Iguanas, of course, jungle animals who eat jungle vegetables, but somehow they got themselves into this island where there is no jungle. It's a completely arid, dry, cactus-like place. And so they decided to start eating seaweed. In order to get to the seaweed, they got to swim. So they learned how to swim. So they're the only iguana that swims and eats seaweed. Now, the interesting part is that seaweed's pretty salty, and a jungle iguana doesn't really have a salt problem or issue with salt. So they developed the ability to excrete salt in their nose. There's a gland in their nose, and so then they sneeze it out. So as you're looking at these iguanas, you see them just sneezing these white pieces of, and they're really salt, to others, to outside, in order for them, and they're thriving. They are everywhere on every rock next to the water, right? So that's an encouragement to you that if you are a land iguana, you are a jungle iguana, you can actually go completely to the other side and become a marine iguana and take advantage of no predators, the ability to thrive in a completely different environment. It just requires a little bit more engineering, and to see yourself as not a fixed quantity, but something that can be upgraded and moved on to the next step. So I hope this was helpful for you. Tyson's last word.
Yeah, I just wanted to thank the IEEE and Terrence for this opportunity to have this discussion. I hope it was valuable for everybody. I know in me just taking those few minutes, I've learned a lot more about myself and how I can apply it to my job and even future careers. And I encourage people to, reach out, find a mentor. Don't be afraid to network. I know for myself, almost every job I've taken was because I knew somebody there, and I maintained those connections. Even though I'm not working with Terrence anymore, we still have a connection, and I'm sure one day we'll overlap somewhere again. And whenever I've left any position, it's always been on good terms to try and maintain that connection, because you never know, you may come back and cross paths with them again. So I'd like to thank everybody for this opportunity again. It was really valuable.
Thanks. It's great working with you again, Tyson. I hope we can do it again.
Same here, Terrence.
All right, folks. So we have unfortunately run out of time, ran a little bit over, but really appreciate you all joining us and for your great questions. Terrence and Tyson, also really appreciate you guys in joining us today and providing our audience insight into your recommended self-assessment and evaluation tips. We've received a lot of feedback, positive feedback from our audience, so I think a lot of them have found it pretty helpful. So really, again, thanks again, guys.
And feel free to continue a conversation. My link is for LinkedIn is QR codes up there, and you'll have opportunities. I'm always interested in speaking with new folks and getting to know them. So follow me and let's have a connection.
Absolutely. And thank you to everyone for attending today's live stream webinar. As mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we'll be sending a short survey to all registrants after this event. Would love your feedback. Our next webinar in the Ultimate Upgrade Essentials series with Terrence Yeo will be on Friday, September 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern. The registration link has been provided below and in the comment section. Please don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to our channels on social media, and check back daily for future live stream updates. Have a great day, everyone.